listening to the PT Pinecast, where smart people in healthcare come to make noise. Here's your host, Jimmy McKay.
Thanks, voice guy. Want to say thanks to Sarah Health, the remote care platform helping clinics boost revenue without adding staff. They're supporting the show. Sarah automates daily patient check-ins via text. Read into that, via text, which means no app and no logins. You had me at hello. No app to download and no login, a password to memorize. Great. They lead to better outcomes. Check them out. It's a simple way to meet those RTM requirements, improve follow-through, and actually get reimbursed for care between visits. It's simple to set up, which I know you're probably thinking, how hard is it? It's simple to set up, simple to use, and patients actually like it. Why? Because they don't have to log in anything. It meets them where they are. Where are we? We're in our text message inbox. That's where we are. SarahHealth.com. That's SARA health.com. I would say Sarah without the H, but then damn it, there's an H in health. So it's Sarah, SARA health.com. Our guest today started in the clinic, like most of us. Patients on a schedule, a lot of them. Documentation to finish, a lot of it. Productivity targets looming, always. But instead of just treating patients, he kept asking bigger questions, which usually leads to stuff like answers or pathways. Why do some clinics scale and others stall? What are the reasons? Why do some PTs plateau financially while others build influence and leverage? What's the secret sauce, or is there one? What does the future of musculoskeletal care actually look like, and who's controlling it? Over 25 years, he moved from provider to operator, from operator to executive, left and came back, and now advises growth across healthcare organizations, navigating predictive analytics, value-based care, the big, hairy, scary future, and all of it, what it really takes to win in modern PT. Today, we're talking about career progression, economics, value-based care, and why PT's role in MSK is foundational to this healthcare system. Let's welcome to the show, Jeremy VanDevender. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
How was that intro? Me. Did I overhype? Did I miss anything?
I think you're good.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've done a lot of different things, and you've seen things from different angles. I think that's even probably more important too, because you can talk to people at different points in their career, different spots in this profession, and you've either sat in that chair or you've worked with people who are sitting in that chair. So let's start with a huge open-ended question. When a PT says, I want to be successful, what do they usually mean from your point of view? And what are they missing to get there?
Yeah, unfortunately in our profession, I think the pathway to success is pretty confusing. I mean, what in other professions, you think about, let's use being an attorney, for example. You go into corporate law, it's a very linear pathway. You go in, you're a first year, second year, you go down the process, and either you're going to make partner or you're going to peel off and do something else, and it's clear. Banking, all those lines. There's a very direct pathway that people are brought into. I mean, even with physician practice, they go through their residency, they go through their fellowship, and then it's on to practice. In our world, and I navigated this very early on in my career of what success would look like. Originally I wanted to be a professor, a biomechanist, a researcher, and a super elite physical therapist. And to me, that was success. I was going to be the next, using an iconic name, Kevin Wilk from, 25, 30 years ago. That was what I wanted to be like. Then I got into the mix of that, and I wasn't great at research. I went to get a PhD, and I could think about it in my head. It was amazing, but it wasn't what I executed on. So I had to find another pathway. And for me, that was a much more of I'd say an executive trajectory pathway. And I go back to like what physical therapists, see in their career. I don't think that they come out of PT school or in the early, literally that first 5 years of their career where that's in so many ways the inflection point of where you're going to go. There's such an unclear pathway towards what determines success. So I think that, physical therapists look at it as a scatter plot. I'm going to be, there's some I'm going to be a great therapist and take care of a bunch of patients and get do a residency and be a star PT. There's others that, they want to go into more of a administrative route. And what I found in a lot of those cases, it's not okay, the steps, they can say, I want to go this direction, and maybe figure that out. But the outcome is really unclear. And I think there's a bit of maybe it's a glass ceiling, maybe much more than a bit of a glass ceiling of leadership within our profession, where physical therapists who come up through the ranks as being providers and, are going this direction of, let's call it executive leadership as an example, they don't see themselves often beyond the role of a VP. They see themselves kind of landing in this static state at 10, 15 years out, and it's okay, now what? So I think that where I come back to, and in PTs I've talked to, I don't think they really know what success actually is. I think that's lent itself to a little bit of maybe a regression around, well, if I can't see myself on a pathway to economic or professional success that's really clear, it really jumps out, and I can define, then I'm just going to acquiesce to more of call it a lifestyle career. I'm going to focus on, having a good income, doing something I like, and having work-life balance, because I just don't think they see the opportunity for a real destination, what you consider financial, professional, high-level success at the top of the industry. So I think it's honestly, it's, I'm answering your question with a bit of a gap here, which is I don't think most PTs honestly know, and they default to, in some senses, the easiest pathway, which is be a good clinician. I'm going to have a nice lifestyle, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody else, I can't remember who answered this, said part of it might be the educational environment, which is after 8th grade, I go to 9th grade. After 9th grade, I go to 10th grade. There's always something set up for me. And then you graduate, it's sort of like, well, do whatever you want. But you're saying, what are those pathways? And you would think in a world with smartphones where we can essentially peer into corners of the world that we would not be able to see 20 years ago. Every day, someone could be showing you're getting ready with me, behind the scenes as an executive, behind the scenes as an owner. People still, I guess they choose the path of least resistance that's close. Like someone said the other day, you don't choose the best tax preparer or mechanic. You choose the best one that you know. So if you don't know of the pathways, if they're not obvious to you, it's a self-imposed glass ceiling almost.
Yeah. And that's where I reflect back on my early career, and I felt that in many ways early on too, where, okay, what am I going to do? And, I didn't really know what I was good at until I had the chance to fail or succeed on my own.
Right.
And
we never do.
Yeah, I got my first director job running one clinic in 2001. I was 2 years out of PT school. I had no idea what to do. I had no business training. I had no leadership training. I just had nothing. I was at Health South. The clinic was falling over. There was really, I think we were seeing like 8 visits a day. It's the kind of clinic you give to a first-time director who if it fails, it fails. It doesn't really matter. So they give it to, someone 2 years from out of school. And I was able to turn that clinic around from doing 35, 40 visits a week to 180 visits a week within 9 months. And it was literally just me throwing on, my backpack and my business cards and walking the streets of Hoboken to talk to all the doctors, do all the community work, do everything you needed to do to build a practice. And then I realized, through doing that that's actually something I'm really good at. I'm really good at, visualizing what success and visualizing what good or great looks like and sharing that story, and then developing followership. And it equated to getting a really strong following of referrals early on. And I realized, in some sense, I was successful because I was the loudest voice in town. I was the one who was willing to get out there and walk around and knock on doors and tell the story. I certainly wasn't the best therapist. I was 2 years out of school and didn't really know what I was doing, but I worked really, really hard. And then I realized that, this is something that is a unique opportunity for me to build upon. And that's where I went full on to, be on the business side of physical therapy. But I would have never, ever known. I would have never even known this had I not gotten that opportunity to, lead a failing clinic. And that's what actually brought me to Ivy a year and a half later to start that company. But the real thing that, I come back to, that point in time, I reflect on that, self-imposed glass ceiling. I was just never comfortable being held back. I was like, I'm going to find my way. So I spent a great deal of my time finding really smart people and incredibly talented people that I could force myself to be mentored by. No one wanted to mentor me. I forced myself in the room at every turn, and I eventually found my footing. Reminds me of then this was, not getting paid for it. This is something I talk a lot about. I did a lot of things early on that I did not get paid for. I was making very low. My starting salary was less than $40,000 a year. I was a clinic director, treating 90 visits a week, making $48,000 a year. Those were difficult times. And,
Sure.
I was in New York, and I was going to the Upper East Side, Manhattan, to the hospital for special surgery and watching surgeries on my own, outside of hours, 6 in the morning, getting up there and, watching 4 hours of surgery, then going to Hoboken and treating for 10 hours, then going, that's what I had to do. And I remember one of these stories really sticks with me. And there's this iconic doctor who was the chair emeritus of the hospital for special surgery and former team doctor for the New York Giants, and Russ Warren, just one of the icons of orthopedic surgery. And I remember I was, in the locker room going into surgery with him and David Olchek and a bunch of other, big time doctors there. And I was this 26-year-old PT who didn't know anything up or down. And I'm sitting there, putting on my scrubs, and there's this Dr. Warren next to me. He's, big, imposing guy. He looks at me, he's like gruff, he's 70s, just a gruff guy. And he's like, "What are you doing in here?" And I'm like, it's HSS, the residents, the fellows, these are ballers. I mean, it's a whole different level. And I'm just his PT, and I just looked at him, and this moment I had this like sort of strength of, okay, I'm just going to stand up and say why I'm here. And I said, because I want to learn from you. You're one of the best doctors in the world. I want to see you do surgery and learn from you. And he looked at me, and it's a big risk to say that, I guess, and he looked at me, he's like, "Oh, okay, that's great. Let's go." Before I knew it, that guy, that doc, a couple of things, he introduced me to the New York Giants, and I started having the opportunity to work with the Giants and work with the training staff of the Giants at the same time, which is really cool. And that's actually what led me into Ivy, because that group of investors, that group out of original 25 years ago, those are the ones that raised the capital to start Ivy Rehab, and they knew me. And they literally knew me because I forced myself in that room. I was a nobody. And that's what gave me my launch pad to start a practice. And ultimately it started a company, and 25 years later, here I am.
There's a lot to unpack there, man. You just covered a lot of ground. I want to go to one thing I wrote down, which is you said you could visualize things in research, but it wasn't working out. Yeah. So you recognized you had a skill and you tried to use it one place and it sort of wasn't working. And then you used that sort of same skill a different place. And next thing you know, it worked really well. And the important part, you liked it. Because even if it worked and you didn't like it, you probably wouldn't have done it as much. And that goes to...
And something cool about that, I mean, you say it, and it's not always as linear as like, I applied it, it didn't work, I went somewhere else. I mean, this was way down the line. One of the things I'm most proud of, or had some of the most fun doing in my career, was between 2022, 2023 at Ivy. And we got into a level of some real scale, and we were, built into a national engine. People started to know about us, and we had a mandate around, in my view, when you're at that level as a provider group, you have a mandate to the profession to elevate the game and do things the right way. And we decided that we were going to make a material investment in building an outcomes and research platform from the ground up. And, not most companies don't have it. We didn't use a vendor. We built it, from the bolts. And that was, me having the opportunity then, I had to lead that initiative and bring on a PhD and build the whole thing and do our, it started with MIPS and it became a true outcomes program. And what I realized is I love research. I love data. I love all that stuff. I'm not a good publisher. I'm not good at seeing a study through. I always make a mistake somewhere in the study and I just fall apart and you got to redo it. But what I'm good at is articulating the vision, seeing it, and working around really smart people who have a skill set and expertise there. And, look back, that was one of the things that I'm really most proud of, was creating this really high-powered, best-in-class outcomes, predictive analytics platform that we could do research out of. And you can see, people at Ivy publishing research out of this platform. And it's my name's not on it, but it gives me a lot of joy to look back on and say, that's something I was good at.
Yeah, you use your familiar skills in an unfamiliar way. You thought, well, I like sort of what research does. I like the impact it has, so I'll be a researcher. And then you got there and you're like, oh, I'm not great at this, but I still like the way it works. But if I can fund the engine that can produce research, that's just as important, right? I work with the Foundation for PT Research. It doesn't make any sense to have Jimmy McKay on your board because I haven't done a lick of research, but they don't need another researcher. They got oodles of that. They need people who understand how to create attention, because attention drives marketing, marketing drives business, business drives money, money drives research, and then round and round we go.
Yeah,
how did you get people to follow you? There's a lot in that first clinic, right?
Yeah.
How great, well, I mean, looking back, it's like you got handed something that if it failed, nobody would have blinked twice, but you looked at it as, I can do whatever I want and I can poke and fail and poke and hold on a second, that I pressed this and that happened. How did you mentioned how you got external buy-in? You put a backpack on, you filled it with business cards. You didn't come home until the business cards were empty. You got up at, I don't know what hour you were getting up to get to HSS at 6 o'clock in the morning, but in New York, you must have been get up at 4.
Yeah.
How did you get internal buy-in? Because there's no way you did that on your own, too.
No, some reason I've always had a gift. I've been blessed with the ability to build followership. I've been told from people that will say, hey, I want to jump on that train. I've seen it a bunch of times in my career. And I think what it is I lead with passion. I found that negativity is obviously it's very polarizing, and you have a choice every day to be positive or negative, and how you look at the world, and the outlook. And sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes you wake up and you're surrounded by negativity. And what I do know is that people don't follow or get inspired by negativity. They will act against it. They'll engage in negativity, but they're never going to follow that. So I've found myself in my most powerful capabilities, and where I've been at my best is when I have a kind of a broad, just a light about the future, which is if we come together and leverage our respective skill sets, and I'm going to give you, and this is anybody that would work with me, license to do what you're passionate about, and I'm going to help you find the way. I look at myself as a leader along those lines of, I'm here to inspire and bring out the best of someone and to give them the road to go and do it. So from very early on, when I was running a clinic to where I am today, I've always given people around me who had the willingness to jump on a train with me the autonomy and the ability to do what they're best at and to support them in doing it. And it really has created a tremendous amount of followership that I'm really proud of. And that I try to empower people to be their best and do what they have fun and enjoy doing and run with that. You're
a Hannibal from the 80s A-Team. I do a lot of 80s TV reference. You're a Hannibal, right? Which is, I'm holding a cell phone right now, and people will give credit or points to people who have large followings. But what are you actually creating? Like, here's the question. You have a lot of followers. Where are you leading them? What are you leading them to? If it's to collect followers, I don't understand the value in that. If it's to empower people to do the most them, people will follow you for a long time. Like they will follow. People will react to negativity. Positivity is slower, but more powerful. It's just also harder to cook with. You know what I mean? Like
it is. And I find that to be, honestly, one of the hardest things I do every day is, you wake up, start your day, and you have a choice. How are you going to see the world? And, you look at the news, look at anything else, look at your emails, and it's very easy to get pulled down into, woe is me, or, woe is the profession. We're getting clobbered by rates and turnover, et cetera. And I just, for whatever reason, throughout the course of my life, and this certainly predates myself professionally, have just always chosen to say, I'm going to take the more aspirational road, because that inspires me personally. And if I'm inspired personally, I can then inspire other people.
Right.
And I really think that inspiration is about, and followership is about, giving people the tools to do what they're best at, and then giving them the free reign, the license to go after that without being afraid of failure, without being afraid of, letting somebody down,
Right.
and supporting them through that failure. And I'm just astounded by, looking back on some of the people I've been able to work with, and see what their careers have done. And it's really a huge variety of success, for people. I mean, I've got, colleagues that I thought were going to be, clinical executives because they were so good, at a certain part. And you know what? That's not what they wanted. They wound up, circumventing back to another place and becoming rock star physical therapists, treating, elite athletes, and have an amazing career there. It's not defined by how much money you make. It's defined on how, and I think that's going back to almost the first question, what really, matters the most. It's allowing people to do what they love, find what they love, and do what they love. And if you let people do what they love and build around that, they're almost always going to be successful.
Yeah, they'll find a way to success. Like a lot of times you look at someone who is successful, I have anyway, and I've seen it sort of, not that it doesn't matter, but it was like if they really cared about it, they'd find a way of being the best florist in town if they really just decided one day it was flowers and not rehab. So you've been doing this for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I like similarities and differences. What are the things that have stayed the same, and what are the things that have changed? Macro, things in the profession.
Yeah. So foundationally, I kind of laugh when I think about this. Like, what has not changed? The human body, the patient.
Right.
It's the end user is the same. There's no difference in what people wanted from PT 30 years ago, 15 years ago. They want to feel better, and they are there trusting the therapist to take care of them, make them feel better, educate them, support them. So that, I think that's the foundational thing that has not changed. Everything else honestly has changed. You think about it from, I mentioned this before, I came out of PT school, there were 200 applicants for the first job I got in Kokomo, Indiana. I don't know how I got it. My starting salary was $37,500. I had 20 patients a day on my schedule. There's no question I didn't get to complain because there were 200 other people waiting for my job. Right. This is in a rural area, an hour north of Indianapolis, that nobody would want to go to, but yet 200 people wanted that job. That environment is obviously completely different. And I don't go back to the glory days where, we should be treating 20 visits per day. I don't celebrate that per se. I do think that, that's a whole other conversation about productivity and, what can be done and expected, and the balance between quality and productivity. Obviously that's certainly changed. There's no question that requirements around documentation, authorization, et cetera, have become exceedingly more difficult. But on the other end of that, the technology and tools to support that have become our next generation. I mean, when I came out of PT school, I was writing notes on paper. And we did have authorization, and verification, and as we had to, support our visits. People don't think that, they think that all happened in the mid 2000s. That's not the case. It was, I remember OrthoNet coming in the early 2000s and making our lives miserable and saying, if you don't have, if you have 4 out of 10 pain, you're discharged. If you have 7 out of 10 pain, you haven't gotten better. So you had to live within this 4 to 7 and you get 6 visits. And that was, 22 years ago. So I don't think those things have changed per se, but definitely the demands for validating treatment have changed. The reimbursement climate is different, obviously. And in some senses, you can see that we have not seen reimbursement keep up with inflation, but reimbursement at the same time is significantly higher than when I started practicing. And there's a number of reasons for that as well. And I think people get lost in that myth that, physical therapy reimbursement is in the basement. It's not, but you got to work for it. I mean, there's an equation here. You just don't fall out of bed and get, $100 a visit. You've got to work for it. I definitely think the physical therapists are obviously very different. I mean, when I graduated, I was the last bachelor's class of my program before they swapped to a DPT. And, the mindset of a therapist, who we were, all those years ago, I think is definitely different. There's a bunch of feeders to that. It was massively competitive to get into PT school in the 90s and the 80s. It was almost, it was harder than medical school, 400 or 500 students applying for 40 spots. So I think we had a lot more 30 years ago, therapists were very intentional about going into PT school. And it was a decision you make. It was really hard to do, really hard to get in. And I think most of the therapists back in that generation, myself included, because it was something we were so dedicated to becoming, and we stuck with it. And I see a lot more of people today saying, it's hard, I want to do something else. I didn't see that in my generation. And then one of the last things I would call on, just from a personal standpoint, is work-life balance was never part of the equation. We didn't think about that. Those words didn't exist. We worked, and the rest of it kind of came. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's great that we have a better, broader view of life than just grind and work, but it has definitely had its impact on the professional advancement opportunities in our profession around this work-life balance construct that I've never embraced personally, but I definitely see the value of.
Well, you work with organizations, and we'll get to what you get to do now in a second, but I feel like, I'll tip my hand a little bit, which is, since you've done most of the roles at organizations you're probably advising, if a clinician is sitting there saying, what do we want? More money. When do we want it? Now. Are the people who find most success on the leadership angle saying, that's great, let's figure out how to do it together, instead of saying, well, these kids today just want to work less and make more? Are the people most successful the ones that saying, let's, like what you did, let's figure out how to do that together, because if you get that, you're never going to leave me, and then I'll be able to hand you a clinic in 2 years? Where it feels like, I understand nobody's wrong in what they want. Where I think there's a disconnect in is, how do we get that? It's not me not paying you or making you work too much and me laughing and swimming around Scrooge McDuck style in my vault. That's probably not the case. It's not the case. How do we get there together? I feel like the organizations that figure that out succeed. And that shouldn't be a problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question. And it's you have a choice when you're presented with major market shifts over a generation, and you see this going. And I recall experiencing this really the strongest in 2022 when the Great Resignation came. It was like all of a sudden in April of 2022, everyone decided that their pent up desire to leave a job would happen in the same day. Right. And turnover went from normal to just boom, like the world toppled. And this was an experience I had that I'm really proud of, that we as a management team did at Ivy. When that happened, we looked around and we didn't blame the field. We didn't blame the universe around us. We blamed ourselves and said, wait a second, we're missing something. What are we going to learn from this experience? And we immediately, dug into the ground. We polled our people. We asked the hard questions. We made ourselves vulnerable. We let them beat us up around what it was that was driving to, this significant shift in turnover. There's obviously a lot of pent up frustration and fatigue coming out of COVID. It was just a resettling of, the way the world was operating at that point. But we learned a ton. And, what we learned is, for us to be successful and to engage our therapists, we had to meet them where they were. And that's providing them the tools and the experiences that matter to them: clinical education, professional support and development, alternative pathways to what success actually means, a clinical career ladder that allows you to celebrate and thrive clinically, if that's your direction. I think there's far too little of that in the profession, where we're incentivizing and celebrating great clinical work. On the alternative end, we built a very powerful executive leadership trajectory to say, if you want to go this route, we got you. And we built, internal training that we invested in as a management team to help them get to that level. And we pulled back all the layers of the onion that you need to truly understand the profession. And we shared that with our teams. And I think that, you want to understand how to make more money. Here's the equation. Right. Therapist generates X. They want to make Y. We need to make a margin to preserve the value of this business. And more importantly, because the value of the business doesn't resonate to people. What they care about is, what are you investing back? And we were very clear that all of the money that we made, generally speaking, was invested in the platform and in the development of our teams. And we built, 9 residency programs, all of these really great things to bring up our clinicians. And 100%, as you said, that the provider groups that are doing that and not sitting back and, angrily arguing with the windmills or, swinging, I'm sure there's some other narratives out there to use, but, fight with windmills that you're not going to win that fight. The world is telling you something. You've got to respond, react, and evolve. And the great companies, and there's several of them out there, are doing exactly that. And they don't have to be at scale. This is not an element of, okay, there's the 5 or 6 large companies that are out there that are able to do this and the rest of the universe can't. That's just not true. The in between, the clinics that have, 2, 3, or the companies that have 2, 3, 4 clinics, 15, 20, 100, they can do great things too. And many of them are. It's just about meeting your team and your clinicians, and not just your clinicians, your whole team, where they need to be met, and not arguing with the past and complaining about the future, but being solutions oriented.
Sounds like Chris Voss, who was FBI hostage negotiator, would say, if someone's speaking logically and you're speaking emotionally, you're just going to talk past each other. So but when you can recognize that as a real leader, you understand if someone's speaking emotionally, my job is to listen. It sounds like the really fancy thing that you did there, Jeremy, was listened.
Yeah.
And then you evaluated what was said, figure out what you could do about it. And then you did that. Probably not all of it at once, because that might not be possible, but you kept listening and you kept evolving. And when people feel, Oprah said this, people want to be seen, heard, and understood. If you can show them that, not just tell them that, you can show them that, people tend to not want to leave.
And it's something I love about consulting. That's actually the first thing I do with any organization that I go into and look at as a consultant is, what is the state of the org? I think, when you're hired as a consultant, a lot of times, you're viewed as, come in here and fix it, get things better tomorrow. I've got a problem. I need you to be a solution. Sometimes I feel like we're like the Winston Wolfe of from Pulp Fiction. That's my generation. When you come in and fix it, I'll leave the movie to the rest of the audience to obviously watch. I'm amazed by how many people have not seen Pulp Fiction, but I got to remember.
But look what you just did. Winston Wolfe, and if you haven't seen Pulp Fiction, turn this episode off right now. I don't want to speak to you. It's a great film.
Yeah.
They were in an emotional state. Something bad just happened, and they were emotional. And he walked in and was just like, I am speaking logically. I am Winston. I am in charge. You do what I say, you will get this. And they did everything he said, and it happened. But he had to put them on the logic train. He's like, I'm not going to speak to you emotionally, because then we're just going to spiral around in circuits. Then we all get caught. I'm going to bring you into logic mode now, and I'm going to tell you one thing to do at a time. Do that. You will get that thing I just promised you.
Yeah. So, leadership lessons from Quentin Tarantino. It's it's a bit of a macabre film, but it definitely resonates from where and what I first do when I go into an org is it's let's talk about your team, your culture. What are you doing? What are your pain points? And now obviously that when you're a consultant, the biggest pain points are always, I want to grow my revenue, or I want to build my team. I've got a turnover problem. I've got a marketing problem. I've got a sales problem. But it's easy just to go right to the problem. I want to get underneath that and truly understand why is that happening and what do you want to do about it. So we listen, we probe, and I encourage something we did. I mentioned at Ivy. It was such a great experience. We did pulse surveys of our team quarterly. And it's one thing to do a pulse survey, and if you haven't seen the pulse survey, it's a really great tool. 12 questions from I can't remember the book. It'll probably strike me in a bit, or we'll figure that out. But it's a really it's a great way to learn about the experience of your team. But it's only as good as what you actually do with it. So I've always said this: like, you don't do a pulse survey or a survey like that to just hear the answers. You do it, and then you wrap it back and really drill into where we're going and have conversations with your team to say, I recognize this, and I'm going to fix it with you, for you, to give you a better experience. And when you do that, kind of goes back to what we were saying about Oprah. That's what leads to people trusting you. Then of course you have to execute, and that's the big role of being a consultant. That's what I really love to do, is to get in there, to dig in, to explore. I think it's also why I love doing M&A. Because you're going in and you're learning, you're peeling back layers, and you're finding the different pearls, and then building a plan around those pearls. And it just is something that I would encourage every company owner, anybody that's got wants to reach this generation, grow their business, be successful, you've got to go back to your team and understand what their motivations, what their experiences are, and build off of those. Otherwise, you're completely blind.
Yeah. I mean, I learned a leadership lesson from my dad, who was not in business at all. I mean, he was a New York City firefighter. And when he got promoted from a firefighter to a lieutenant, he was like, now I'm in charge of other people. And the leadership lessons that he got was, I work for them. I wear a white shirt now. I'm in charge, but my job is to bring everybody home. So my job is I work for them. And when I took over I took over a radio station at like 24. And I remember like being so nervous. I had worked under the guy who ran the radio. I was not starting a radio station. I was just like, essentially it was like, I was handed a thing. It was like it's a B+. It was like, just don't lose. If you stay B+, you're fine. But I was sleeping on the couch. I was so nervous. Like I wouldn't go to bed. I was just staying up. And my dad was like, the two things he gave me. One, is anybody going to die tomorrow if you screw up at the radio station? And I was like, okay, Dad, no, got it. And then once he got me giggling, I left emotion, went back to logic. And he was like, so your job is just to listen to them and then give them what they need. And I was like, oh, the answer's already going to be in the room if I shut up. My job was not to go in there and be like, I have all the answers, follow me. My job was like, give me your biggest problem. Give me your biggest three. And then which one can I solve? And then you trust me a little more. And I go, now when I tell you I'm working on the other two, stick around and we'll do that. And that was it. I did that over and over again.
You know, as you talk about that, I reflect on just some of the lessons I've had in leadership, and that you speak to the, you know, we complicate things very often. And I like the point you said, is anyone going to die if this radio station fails?
Right.
Is anyone going to die if the clinic I am in Hoboken 25 years ago doesn't make it? No. And, you know, you mentioned your father-in-law, or your father is a New York City firefighter. My father-in-law, my wife's mother, he was a New York City cop for 40 years. And you know, he was ultimately one of the, you know, he was very high up. He was the, I think one of the top NYPD officers on the ground at the World Trade Center for, you know, after the attack. And, you know, and my brother was a infantry combat officer in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you know, went to West Point and you know, was in the 101st Airborne in Iraq, and then later in Afghanistan. And you know, what I think in that early stage of my career, that 2001, 2, 3, 4, when I started to see, like, I was going in some leadership opportunities, and I was contrasting, and I think it really strikes me like it's not that big of a deal. Like, my daughter would be like, it's not that deep. You know, it's like, this daughter's 17. I hear that all the time. And I'll say that, like, it's not that deep, bro. It's like the language of a 17-year-old girl. But, you know, I wasn't saving lives. I wasn't in danger. This was, you know, I'm empowering people to do well in their career. The stakes are relatively low. Have fun, you know, enjoy it a little bit, because there are professions like, you know, your father's, my father-in-law, my brother, that are inherently profoundly dangerous, and the stakes are significantly higher, and you can't really have fun in that situation. But you know, you can enjoy that, you know, and this is not that deep. You know, you're helping people you're helping to inspire and enable and create opportunities for people. It should be fun, and it should be wildly rewarding. So I think that's a really important lesson for people as they explore, you know, their career, their pathway. Have fun. Do what you kind of goes back to what you mentioned before. I'm kind of looping back to the original question, like, what is success? Like, it really should be doing what you love.
Yes.
That should be it. Like, the definition of success, it can't be money. It can't be prowess or power. That's all totally fungible. That can be taken away tomorrow. It doesn't mean anything. Everyone's got their own individual needs. And I don't begrudge anybody's, you know, going after the needs. But at the end of the day, it has to come back to you're having fun. And beyond that, you're inspired and you're passionate. I think success truly is defined by doing something you love and are inspired to do, and you want to get up every day and do. And you get, the beautiful thing in a career is you can recycle that. You know, I once loved doing that as a clinician. I loved treating patients. Then I loved being a senior executive operator. Then I loved being a development leader. And now I love having a consulting company. It's hard, but that takes me back. Like, that's what gets me through the hard, is that I actually love it. And I love the people I'm around. So I use that word a lot. And I think that's one of the most critical things, is you're inspired by and you love. And if you have that, you can do anything.
Are you familiar with the Ikigai?
No.
is once somebody explained this, you just explained it. You don't know it, but the Japanese put words to it. And I don't like, and for the people listening, I don't really do slides a lot, but I keep this sort of one finger away, and that's the Ikigai. So like you need 4 things. You need to love it.
Yep.
You need to be good at it. You need to be able to get paid for it. That doesn't mean $1 million, but like you have to be able to, that's where that's like worth like balance. It's like, yes, you need to be able to define what above water means to you and then be above it or more. And then the world's got to need it. And this is one of those examples. And if you read a book about it, they'll go into like, well, 3 out of 4 is bad. But what it feels like you're saying is like, you can find that the intersection of those 4, that's what Ikigai is, reason for being. That's the Japanese word. You can find that in different ways. Like I ran a radio station. That was it. The only reason I left there was the world was changing with smartphones. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do that here. I better go find it somewhere else. I changed it. Well, wouldn't you know it? I accidentally, bought a microphone as a PT and figured that out. But it can be different things and it should change. It sounds like, you found the middle of that equation several times with different roles. Success isn't a job. It's a combination of those 4 things.
And I think that's the beauty of, as you think about this and explore this, if I was talking to a 25-year-old therapist come out of school, I'd say, be willing to sacrifice and don't expect the world to give it to you. You have to be willing to sacrifice, and not everything is about getting paid. A lot of the best experiences I had in my life where I was not paid for them, I learned. And you are trading, the currency that you gain is information, learning, and development. Now, I sacrificed a lot too. And, in my 20s, when everyone was having fun and traveling and doing some of the cool stuff, I wasn't. I was working and, I was grinding and trying to build a career. And, that was a trade-off I made. I don't regret it whatsoever. I'd rather, do that on the back end when I'm, I feel more comfortable and, doing what I want to do. But that was a deliberate sacrifice. And a lot of it was I did things that did not pay me. I went to training camp with the New York Giants and stayed in the dorms for a week. It sounds exciting, but it really wasn't. Doing 16-hour days. I didn't get paid for that. I did not get paid to go to HSS. I went to 10 plus Con Ed courses per year for 5 years. I didn't get paid for that.
You're probably paying.
But I was making an investment in myself. So I think I would always encourage, anybody who wants to be successful to make an investment in themselves and see it through and be willing to compromise a little bit for the long game. That to me is another huge part of success, is being willing to sacrifice and go for the long game.
Yeah. Well, I think it sounds like you would, if you were to give it, so I had this question written down. If you were going to give advice to a 26-year-old who just graduated from PT school, it sounds like you started answering that, but it doesn't need to be the Giants. It's the Giants, if you want it to be the Giants, but whatever your version of that is, quadruple down on that.
Yeah, it could be a youth soccer club, could be a hockey club, could be a assisted living center. You love working with seniors. You have a connection with older people and you want to help them. That's what you should do. It doesn't have to be glamorous. It doesn't have to be sexy. It doesn't have to be at the highest level of any. It's just got to be something you love and you're interested in doing. You'll put your all to, because it's personally rewarding to you. And it doesn't even have to be in PT. It can be in any tangential area where you can find that passion. I think burnout's number one driver of burnout is not being oriented around passion. It's not being oriented around something you love. It goes back to that illustration that you gave before. The solution to burnout to me is to start talking very early on in careers and plotting around, let's stay on track with what you truly love to do and what you're inspired by. And let's also look at this it's not in a vacuum, and understand that's going to evolve, and being willing to allow that to evolve and to work with people to create pathways for them, and on your own to create your own pathways as that does evolve, and not be ashamed of the evolution. I went into another space for a little while. I was excited, the oral surgery space, was excited to do it. I left it because of culturally it wasn't a good fit for me. And that's what prompted my starting my consulting firm. It's those experiences are what allow you to go to the next step. So, do them with inspiration. And I think you can have a great pathway. Agreed.
So talk just like a little bit about who your firm helps. Like, what do you get to do now, and who do you get to do it with?
Yeah. So my firm's Equus Growth Advisors. And the reason it's named Equus is that's Latin for horse. And one thing I share about myself, my daughter, that's the reason I'm in Florida. My daughter is a competitive equestrian. So I spend a great deal of my time and life around horses. And I thought as I started my company, I'd name it as a tribute to my kid because of the work she puts in. I thought it was a cool, just family thing to do. So I fashion, my work as a strategy oriented, growth focused, strategic advisory firm across all of healthcare. And my focus personally is on really analyzing, assessing businesses and creating strategic solutions for them to navigate the challenges they have. Now, largely the challenges that I get most excited about and I try to work towards are growth oriented. I've always viewed the world in like physical therapy business, all healthcare business, as a revenue game. And I think that's also part of that kind of aspirational view or the positive view that you can look two choices. You can go to the middle of the P&L or the top of the P&L. I believe in going to the top of the P&L. That's fun. This isn't fun. I've never enjoyed managing the middle of a P&L. That means you have to cut costs, and that's never an enjoyable experience, at least for me. So I really focus on the top of the P&L of helping companies build a strategic pathway to achieve their growth goals. I slot in a lot of times as a fractional chief strategy officer, chief revenue officer, and bring my experience. It's not just me. It's really important we share that Equus has 15 plus advisors, and we've got a number of clients. It's not a PT oriented firm. It's a healthcare firm. We also have an M&A side of our business where I merged in October with an M&A advisory firm, and they do buy and sell side work across all of healthcare. So we can do the M&A work for or with a company. You want to buy, you have targets you want to go after, we do the buy side work. You want to sell your company, we do the sell side work, and everything in between. So it's really, I try to build this as like a wheel where we've got all the different elements of impact across healthcare, from patient experience, revenue cycle, therapeutic monitoring, which is not again for just PT, it's across all of healthcare, professional development, sales, marketing, talent acquisition. And I also work with a lot of outside groups to help support needs like data and health informatics. We'll go in and build those systems for clients. So it's broad, but hyper focused on strategic revenue growth and execution of targeted goals.
So they get to hire your brain and show you what they're either doing too much of or not enough of, so they can continue to do the thing that most people want to be doing. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good way to put it. They're hiring my brain, my experience, and the team around me, that collectively, if you just think about us from a musculoskeletal standpoint, we've got 225 plus years of experience around the table in musculoskeletal care. And it also points towards the things I really am excited about, which are longer horizon opportunities in musculoskeletal care beyond traditional PT. I love value-based care. I love the evolution of hybrid-based models and being nimble and thoughtful about how to get to the patient. I love supporting evolution and innovation in healthcare. I'm a big proponent of going to meet the patient where they need to be met, which is where they want to be met, whether that's at home, in clinic, virtually, any of those different areas. And I'm such a true believer in PT from the standpoint of bending the musculoskeletal cost curve and the impact it has on the overall expenses in healthcare around the world. I mean, we're talking 40-50% of healthcare spend is on musculoskeletal. Physical therapy is just so disproportionately underrepresented in that equation. I mean, 10% of patients who need it access it, and 80% of them don't complete a course of care. I mean, the opportunity is so profound that I can't find any way to be negative about what's in front of us in the PT space, because we literally sit at the dining table of this massive opportunity to reduce cost of care, improve access, improve outcomes, work across the entire healthcare continuum, threading through a number of different areas that will impact patients and cost and outcomes. That I'm really bullish on the future of PT. I guess sometimes I'm a loud voice in the room saying that, but I don't think I ever won't be. I think patients love what we do. We just need to get to more of them. And I think physical therapists are amazing at taking care of patients, but also they're amazing thinkers. I think it's important that I share that, at Equus with my team, so many of the people I work with are PTs, and I didn't hire them to be PT consultants. I hired them to be healthcare consultants. PTs are amazing at breaking down findings into, thoughtful algorithms and then planning care and then going in and effectuating change. It's no different than what we do with a patient. It's just doing it with a business equation. And I found that physical therapists are awesome at that. So one of the messages I would leave to PTs is understand and leverage that skill set. There's so many applications beyond treating patients that the way we think, the codification of thinking through a critical pathway of, okay, patient presents to me like this, I see this, I'm going to treat this, that applies itself so well outside of traditional patient care in consulting and business operations and all these different areas. It's really an amazing skill set to leverage. And I think therapists really need to pull that inward and say, I've got a skill set, I've got a tool that can be wielded so many different forms. It's a great skill set to tap into.
All right. Well, we have a tradition on the show. We always do something called the parting shot.
This is the parting shot. One last mic drop moment. No pressure, just your legacy on the line.
I mean, you kind of just gave one. You kind of just gave one. I mean, you've given several, but you can reiterate one, you can reuse, but what would your parting shot around the topics we talked today be?
I'd say my parting shot, my mic drop is embrace what you love, build your career around what inspires you, continually test that at all points of your career. Don't look for people around you to give you the solutions, find them within yourself. And it starts with such a simple equation. What inspires me? And when you start to find like that, you get lost in that of like, I'm burnt. It's just burnout is the equation. Why burnout? Burnout is built off of, lack of appreciation, lack of pull through. There's all those different toggling variables of burnout. But the center point to me around navigating burnout and frustration and challenges, going right back to that place of what do I love doing? What inspires me? What do I define as success for myself personally? And not be pulled into other people's definition of success. Don't worry about what someone else says is success. Who cares what I think about what success is? My pathway is not your pathway, is not someone else's pathway, but we can all do incredible things if we believe in them. And the last parting shot I would give is believe in the future of physical therapy. The narrative that's out there that, this is a, challenge space. Yeah, there's challenges. I mean, reimbursement goes down, costs go up. There's we're in an evolving state all the time, but at the foundational core, physical therapy is such a critical part of the healthcare continuum. And we lose track of that, the opportunity in front of us to build a profession that is highly valued by providers, payers, you name them, is right in our hands. We just have to come together as an industry, in my view, and be positive and look at the outlet of, it's not, CMS isn't doing something, to punish us, or, our reimbursement rates aren't going down because we're devalued. We've got to fight against that and press and show the value and never quit. Because if you believe in something, it's worth the effort.
Sure.
And I hope that everybody who spends 7 years and, $100,000 plus to become a PT believes in it. Otherwise, why'd you do it? But tap into that belief and use that belief to carry us forward into this next generation, which I think I'm really excited about. I think the future of PT is bright. I think the future of musculoskeletal care is massively important, and we should be the centerpiece of that as a profession. And I love it. I can't wait to be a part of it.
I'm ready to run through a brick wall here, Jeremy. You got me jacked up here at 11 o'clock in the morning. I like that.
Go out and jump in the snow.
Let's go jump in the snow in upstate New York.
I'll show you one of my palm trees while you're jumping in the snow.
Rub it in. I will. I'll put the link for Equus and for you on LinkedIn as well in the show notes. But appreciate this, man, and we'll have you back on the show pretty soon.
Great. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
That's it for this one, but we're just getting warmed up. Smash follow, send it to a friend, or crank up the next episode. Want to go deeper? Hit us at ptpintcast.com or find us on YouTube and socials at ptpintcast. And legally, none of this was advice. It's for entertainment purposes only. See, Keith, we read the script. Happy now?